Um, if you guys have attended any of these in the past, you might recognize me. I've been doing these for San Marcos or for the district, um, probably around 10 years now. And I've worked with San Diego district schools, uh, for around the same time. Now, I do something a little different. My perspective is the perspective of a therapist. And so that makes all of this information a little bit unique, I think. So we'll just jump in. My name is Courtney Kowalchuk. I am going to kind of give you a little bit of background on me just to give you guys some peace of mind of why you should even listen to me. There's a lot of information out there nowadays, and so I appreciate you guys taking time with us and yeah, choosing to get some information here. Um, so like I said, my name is Courtney Kowalchuk. I'm a clinical therapist and I've been board certified in doing therapy for just under 15 years. I specialize in children and adolescent therapy, and particularly with parenting and doing therapy with people who've experienced some sort of trauma. I've also been certified and trained as a positive discipline parent and teacher educator, which is a lot of where my background in parenting comes from, this positive discipline model. And we'll kind of get more into that in some of our sessions. I do like a positive discipline part one and part two when we do these sessions most years. So if you're interested in hearing more about that and kind of that perspective of parenting or that model of parenting, I will go in more in depth with that. I list a little bit of my experience just so you guys kind of know a little bit about me. You see the picture I have attached with me and my two girls. Um, I worked with Rady Children's Hospital, which I'm sure a lot of you guys know of in this area for many years. I got my licensure there and I did a lot of family therapy and a lot of therapy with children and adolescents. Like I said, the San Diego school districts. I've been working with San Marcos for a long time, Vista. I served in the U.S. Air Force as a clinical officer. I've worked inpatient and outpatient psychiatry clinics, and now I'm in private practice. So it's a little bit about me. That's probably all you need to know. But if you have questions, I'm here for those too. Speaking of that, there is a chat. If any of you don't feel comfortable being on video or audio, you can throw any questions that you have or any comments in the chat. I like to talk to you guys. It makes it a little bit more interesting rather than me just talking at you for 2 hours. The class is from 5 to 7. If you want to say something, go ahead and pop your mic on or throw it in the chat. And I love that because I love interacting with you guys. I think that we learn more from you. And yeah, that's what we're here for. So I love it. If you want to say anything, if you have personal like questions relating to your own parenting, I am here for that. We're going to have some time for that. So I think that's about it in terms of housekeeping and who I am and why you should listen to me. But yeah, let's jump in. Today we're going to talk about resiliency. And what I like to usually do when I have these conversations with parents is I like to start with a quote. And this kind of gets, our brains going and it just gets us talking usually. So this one in particular caught my attention, and it is the human capacity for burden is like bamboo, far more flexible than we would ever believe at first glance. And I just want to know what you guys think about this quote. So if anyone wants to share, if that speaks to you, if you have a personal experience or you can relate to that, let us know. If nobody is really interested in talking about that, I can kind of give you what I think or why I chose it. But for now, I'll kind of just leave it open for anybody to talk about this quote, whether it speaks to you, whether it doesn't, anything that you guys got.
You guys remember the quote?
Mm-mm.
Can you repeat it, Courtney, please?
Oh yeah. It's the quote is from Jodi Picoult, and it says, "The human capacity for burden is like bamboo, far more flexible than we would ever believe at first glance."
Do you want us to say what we like
Yes,
our
yes,
understanding
please.
of that?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, if you relate
Okay,
to
yeah,
it.
so to my understanding, I believe it's saying like the the trials and the things that a human can take, um, like when it comes to life for a burden, like when it comes to problems and stuff is far more flexible as in like it's the things we can take, we can actually take a lot more than we um believe that we can't, like we can actually handle more than we can or something like that. I don't know.
Tolerating, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mia. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
Much background noise happening.
Janet, yes. Go ahead and mute it.
Thanks, guys. Okay, thank you so much for you guys' input. So yeah, Mia kind of hit the nail on the head. I think the idea is that when we talk about something like resiliency, I think a lot of, especially from a mental health standpoint, we want to me, it's a positive view, right? To say that like we are a lot more flexible than we would imagine. And I think it's really important when we talk about trauma and things like that, right? Because the idea is that we things happen, right? Stress happens, things happen, life happens. And how are we going to make it through, right? How are we going to get through the stress, or how are we going to handle all these things? And yeah, I think I personally chose this quote because it leaned more on the positive side, which the data I'll show you it does support, is that we're a lot more resilient than we initially believe. And I think in particularly when we talk about kids, they are so resilient. And so, you guys all spending the time to be here with us, learning about parenting, trying new things, asking questions. Um, you're putting each of you, you're kind of putting your best foot forward. And I think that you're all putting forth effort to do this. And that is kind of what changes things, I think, for people too. And that's what changes circumstances, is that you guys are all trying. We're all here. We all showed up. It's 5 p.m. on a Wednesday where you guys could all be going and having dinner or working. I know some of you guys are, and that's also life. But yeah, I think to look at life from a standpoint of resilience can be really helpful for our mental health. So thank you guys for sharing. If anyone else, if that speaks to you, I know someone in the chat said we don't know how strong we are until that's our only choice. And I really like that too. Same idea, right? We have resilience. We have this psychological principle built in to help us get through things. So yeah, if anybody else wants to say something, you got some time, or you can throw it in the chat. Otherwise, I will kind of move on to the next slide. I appreciate you guys also giving some feedback, because sometimes it doesn't happen and everybody's quiet, and that's okay too, but I like to hear from you guys. Okay, so moving forward, our objectives are, I really want to help you guys invest in recognizing and responding to our student stress, right? Like your children's reactions to stress, because it's going to happen. It happens daily. I want you guys to be able to learn a little bit about resilience in the brain and how we can talk about it from a more scientific lens and more of an evidence-based lens. And that kind of gives us some, I think, robust support to talk about resiliency in a way that's not like kind of positivity based, and it feels kind of like sometimes that can feel bad, but I think talking about it from a lens of like what biology, what um, psychology, what all of this stuff supports, what all of this stuff says is really helpful. So we'll get a little sciencey, but not too sciencey. We're going to explore, I'm going to help you guys explore your ways to help your kids, right? Help your students sit with stress, with uncertainty, how to improve their resiliency essentially. And those kind of go hand in hand. Helping them sit with the stress and uncertainty also improves their resilience. So I'll give you guys some really good practical ways things that a checklist that you can do if you want to screenshot it. We have a copy of the presentation in the chat if it's a PDF version. So you'll have access to that and it'll be recorded. I want you guys to also just learn ways to support your student and balance your own self-care and your own resiliency. Give you guys as parents some tools because as long as I've been working in psychiatry, I have always known that when parents feel better, kids do better. And so I always in my classes when I'm doing this stuff for the district, I always like to talk about parents too and how you can help yourself with these things. Because I need it too. What sometimes feels more than ever, I need it too. So, yeah, I like giving you guys some stuff for yourselves because that's really important. Okay, this is another discussion question. We'll kind of see how much engagement we get here, but my goal is how do you guys how do you think that stress shows up for your child or for your teen? What does it look like to you when your child or your teen is stressed? A lot of people tend to throw this in the chat. I get a lot of like people where they'll just kind of, we can get stuff fast that way, but you could also respond on your mic if you like. Ooh, frustration, anxiety. Oh, heavy breathing. Okay. Responds angrily, lots of yelling, sensitivity. I can't do this. So, like maybe shutting down, ignoring me. Oh, yeah, I hear a lot of that, like shutting down. Confused, negative talk. I think negative talk is really popular, right? We are all our own worst critic. Oh, and it breaks my heart too, because this is our kids we're talking about, right? Like what they're experiencing. Um, Making excuses. Yep. Negative talk. Avoiding food, poor sleep. Okay, so like some parasomnia stuff, sleepwalking. Um, that's genetic too. I slept walk as a child, and my older daughter, does that. Hunger, picking on other siblings. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So it's like our kids get stressed, and they typically, right, a lot of what you guys are describing, they're either internalizing the stress, right? And maybe they avoid, maybe they shut down, maybe they're confused. Um, right? Maybe they externalize, they are yelling, they're irritable, they're angry, they're mad, they're picking on their siblings. Now, my next question, so this is to me, this is good news because you guys can recognize when your kids are stressed, right? Like you're observant, you're picking it up, right? To me, this is good news, not because the kids are stressed and they're feeling these things, but because you guys, you're knowing what to look for. You're knowing, you can pick up the signs, right? Okay, this is what happens. I know my child. I know when they're stressed or overwhelmed. Um, Now, my next question kind of puts us into this other state of mind, which is how do you respond to the stress that your child is exhibiting, right? We could say at your best or at your worst. How do you respond? And then how would we like to respond? How would you like to respond? How do you respond? Whether that's the best of days, days when we've had enough sleep and coffee and we've had food and, we're not overwhelmed ourselves, which I don't know about you guys, but it feels like a lot of those days, right? That we're overwhelmed and stressed too. But how do you respond on those days, best and worst? when your child is stressed? Is there things that work for you that you can do to like talk your child through it? Or is it just like a, I don't even know, and that's why I'm here? A little bit of both. Okay, so we take away screen time or there's no screen time. I actually do one of the classes that we do is on technology and social media. And I talk a lot about that. So stressed, wanting to help, not knowing how or in what way. Best days we're able to talk about it. Yeah. Those are the best, right? When our kids are stressed and we know what to do and we do it and it works, like we execute it and it's like, oh my gosh, they calmed down or they listened or something good came out of this. Um, yeah, those are the good days. Now, there's good and bad. Um, I don't know what the percentage is, but maybe we all have different percentages of the best and worst days. Um, Yeah. It's also really hard. I think, Chelly, if I'm saying your name right, I'm really sorry if I'm not. Um, she mentioned like she starts to feel stressed, right? And that's such a big thing. And something that I work with people a lot in therapy is like, how do we not absorb the emotions of others, particularly when it's our kids? Oh, it's so hard. My 5-year-old, I suck up her frustration when she's mad and she's like stomping around or doing what she's doing. It's really, really hard. Sometimes, some days it feels impossible to do, but I ask people to do it all the time. Um, before I attempt to make sure I don't react. Oh, see, you got to tell us what your secret is. How do you not react to their stress? He tries to be supportive, share similar situations that I've been through, but in a way that I'm not trying to one up them. Oh, that's awesome. And I'd be super interested to hear yeah, what your techniques are on how to not react to their stress. Trying to reduce stress through comfort activities, watching a favorite movie, eating favorite snacks, cuddling. Oh, that's great. So like some active stress reduction. I like that. That's good. So like responding to their stress might not necessarily be in the moment. It might be later. Okay, how do we restrict? Maybe we do some comfort things. We do some extra self-care. We cuddle extra. I like that. Okay, taking away screen time doesn't work for you. Okay. Maribel says, sometimes I just walk away. I tell them I'll come back when you calm down. I hope that works. I think for some kids that totally works. And I think I'm also the type of therapist that like if somebody tells me that they do something and it works for them, I'm like, I mean, let's keep doing it. If it doesn't work, I'll help you change it. But yeah, if that works, um, I mean, sometimes we need the moments to calm down and we have to like go find a place and regulate. Because what a lot of people don't understand is that when we have children who have, right, underdeveloped brains is what we're going to call it because their brains are not developed. They're relying on us to co-regulate, right? So we talk a lot about like you finding your calm first, and if that looks like you need to walk away, and it's safe to do that, you need to walk away. You need to regulate yourself so that you can be calm and show up for them, which I think is the best advice. I try to listen, empathize. I don't always have the patience to do this perfectly. Oh, what an honest admission because I too don't always have the patience. Um, when our kids are stressed and they respond in those externalizing ways, right? Like none of those things you guys listed were like, my kid gets stressed and he goes out for a run or goes and takes a, nice hot shower or right, because kids don't have that yet. They don't have the ability to be like, okay, I'm really upset, my lid is flipped. I'm going to go do this thing that I know I should do, right? So a lot of the times they're relying on us to help them do that. And it's so incredibly hard as parents. We're walking their emotional regulation system through this process. And it's hard enough to do for ourselves. So I totally get that. And I love that comment. There's a lot of honesty here, and I appreciate that. Um, Yeah. Okay. So I really appreciate you guys commenting in the chat. Sometimes it gets real quiet and there's no crickets tonight, and I love it. So we're starting this season off with a bang, which I love because you guys are engaging and it's perfect. So really what I'm trying to do here, right, with all of this is let's get everybody kind of having a conversation of what with yourself, with your co-parents, with your spouses, with whoever, how do I recognize when my child is stressed, overwhelmed, overstimulated, flooded? Um, and then how do I want to respond, right? Not necessarily my instinct, my first reaction, like how do I kind of slow down a little bit? How do I recognize, okay, they're stressed, they're overwhelmed, they're looking for orientation, and they're looking for me to help them co-regulate, right? Sometimes just changing that framework of like they need me to, because their brain hasn't figured this out yet, right? And so that sometimes that can change. It creates a paradigm shift of how we think about our kids' behavior, to be honest. Um, and I'm really not advocating. I don't want anyone to hear me say that and then think like, let's just let our kids do whatever they want, because that's not what positive discipline is about, not what I think. Oh, go ahead. Oh, I'm not sure if I think it's Nithya. Oh, there we go. Okay, she didn't want to say anything. Sorry. Um,
I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. I just wasn't sure if you wanted to say anything. So yeah, ultimately that's what I'm getting you guys to do. How does your child show stress? What are the signs? Can you identify like what those things look like when they're building and when they do externalize those behaviors or the behaviors are negative, right? How can we um put our best parenting foot forward and be like, okay, wait, pause. I'm going to regulate. I remember they're looking to me to regulate. And so that gets us on this path of parenting a little differently. Again, we're not perfect. I think that's my disclaimer every time I do a class is like, we are parents. It's the hardest job that any of us will ever have. I very strongly believe that. And, you know, yeah, I'm very passionate that parenting is really hard and we all need to give ourselves grace because it's the hardest job we'll ever do. Okay. So we have a family says struggling with a big move, kids are unfamiliar and overwhelmed. Everybody's acting out, seeking a calm center to meet and discuss how we feel. I mean, thank you so much for sharing that, Ken. I think the reality is like what you're describing is like that is what I term with parents. Like there's disorientation happening, right, in the family or dysregulation happening. And everybody, particularly the kids, right, but we feel it too, is they're looking to be oriented or reoriented. And that happens through the parents. Um, and so, I mean, the only kind of like neat, like brief advice I could give or strategy I could give is like lean into this move of like validating everyone. This is really uncomfortable. This is really hard. Um, let's talk about it. Let's validate each other instead of like bickering or like, hey, you just need to get it together. It's like, let's just validate that like this is really hard. For whatever reasons it's hard, right? Like enlist that stuff and just talk about it. I think that's going to be the best way to manage that because it's like we're not going to just, okay, we just need to get back to our routine. It's like, no, this is huge. All of our routines are disrupted and kids thrive with routine and structure. And I mean, let's face it, so do adults. I'm sure you guys all remember when we took, I don't know, a week, 2 weeks off, 3 weeks for Christmas. In my own self, my own family, and then in my therapy practice with my clients, we were all just discombobulated. It was kind of crazy, right? That like, um, free space between Christmas and New Year's, the lack of structure and routine is huge. And so, yeah, just name it, say it, talk about it. I think that's kind of the best way to handle it. And a lot of these tips in here can all be really helpful for your family. So thank you so much for sharing. Okay, so what we're talking about, we're going to kind of jump full into this topic of resilience. I'm going to go into some more depth of what that looks like in terms of the brain and psychologically, like what we're talking about when we talk about resilience. Um, Resilience is typically defined as the ability to bounce back, right? We bounce back with every obstacle. But I think even deeper, it's our capacity to adapt, like so change, right, with what's happening. This could be said of the move, right? We're going to adapt to the move. We're going to recover from like things that we lost or change, to the change, the emotional differences, the structural, the routine differences. And then we're going to grow. So in response to whatever adversity, whatever stress, whatever thing is happening, that's negative or right, difficult, stressful, challenging. That's this idea of resilience. What that comes with is when we talk about it in kind of a more concrete sense, what we're talking about is essentially flexibility. And there's a lot to be said of this particular type of, so this is also a type of therapy when we do uh, therapy specifically to increase people's psychological flexibility. And what that means is we're helping people change how flexible they are when something bad happens, right? I'll give you a really good example, and I'll be totally transparent here. When I was serving in the military, I was really struggling. I was stationed in Alaska for a period of time, and it was very dark and it was very cold. And I'm from California, and it was very bizarre for me. And I really struggled with this psychological flexibility when I was there. And so I started seeing a therapist, and her thing was helping me become more flexible to my situation. That I was in this dark place, in this cold place, um, both literally and figuratively, I guess. But the idea is that how do I help you feel less like, a trapped wolf in a cage and more of like, okay, well, I chose this. I chose to commission in the military. I chose this job. I didn't choose Alaska, so to speak, but like right. So it was this teaching for me to become more flexible with the way I thought about my problem, right? My problem was I hate this place, I hate this job, I hate this stuff, right? Like it feels bad. And what I really needed was I needed some resilience. I needed the ability to be psychologically flexible so that I could get through it. And that's what I learned. And it was a great experience. It was also very humbling, right? But at the same time, mental, emotional, and behavioral flexibility is really key when it comes to stress because it's mostly right how we're perceiving those things. And when we talk about resiliency, right, we're also talking about a couple of things. The things that contribute are the ways that we view and engage with the world, right? So my way was I'm a trapped wolf in a cage and I'm freaking out, right? I'm clawing and I'm biting and I'm mad, I'm scared. And that's how I was responding to the world. And that's the way that I viewed it, right? Also, the availability and the quality of resources, because I had the ability to get therapy, right? So it helped me get some more psychological flexibility in the sense that, okay, I view and engage with the world in this particular way, but I have some resources, I have this stuff available to me. And I had these specific coping strategies probably from the time I was a kid, right? So these things really contribute. It's like a triangle. Those things contribute to how mentally, emotionally, and behaviorally flexible we can be. Now, you will see some of those are static, right? Some of those we can change. Some of those we can't. For a lot of us, we may not have access to healthcare or quality therapy services or whatever it is, right? Like It doesn't matter whatever social resource or whatever resource we're talking about to help us cope, right? Or to help us be more flexible. That most of the time we cannot change. Our specific coping strategies, arguably we can change those to a degree. And I don't want to blanket statement any of this, but in a general sense, we can change some of those, right? We can learn new ways to cope. We can try to actively eliminate negative coping strategies, things that make us less emotionally flexible. And we can learn new ways to view and engage with the world, right? Um, some of that feels fixed, and some of that, psychologically speaking, is fixed. And there's also in the next slide or the next couple of slides, we'll talk about genetics and how that influences the capacity to be resilient as well. But for the most part, we're kind of talking about things that are not genetic or not hereditary and that we can change. So one of those things that really shows biologically or physiologically, it shows more in more resilient minded people is the antioxidant glutathione. It's considered like the protector of cells. And so that, like I said, is not necessarily something that we have total control over. And at the same time, we could kind of go down a rabbit hole and decide, like, okay, how could I increase that antioxidant? Where do I get sources of that? That could help. Um, and yet, what we find is that the science is telling us that people who have more resiliency have more of that in their body. Um, Kind of changing gears is like the next point on our PowerPoint is resilience is not equivalent. This is also, I like to disclaimer this, it's not equivalent with not showing emotion, burying your emotion, numbing out. Um, Resilience is not that, right? So the ability to bounce back is not just like, I think a lot of maybe older generations, it was like, hey, just deal with it, right? Figure it out. You're not feeling any of that, just keep going, right? And I think that there's a lot of purpose to that. And there also can be some harm with that model, right? That way of thinking. But what I'm not saying is to do that. The research actually shows that when we numb out, when we like say, oh, it's not depression, it's not being, burned out, it's you just need to keep going. That doesn't work long term. So it's not what I'm saying is that we're gonna just like shut things down. The process of resilience is that we experience those emotions, we help our kids feel and experience those emotions, and we move forward with them, right? We use some of that flexibility to say, okay, I'm allowed to be stressed out and upset that I live in Alaska in the darkest place and there's no sun. And yet I can validate that feeling for myself and I can move forward. But if I don't, right, if I just kind of sit there and I tell my clients like camp there, if I set up camp, well, I'm just kind of growing that emotion, right? That's my view and engagement with the world. That's how I'll feel about it. And I'm stuck there, right? Um, so feel free as I'm going to throw questions in the chat. We're going to get, like I said, a little bit more into the science of it. When we talk about resilience and the brain, I told you guys that some of this we believe now we're kind of finding through modern science is that there's genes, two genes specifically that influence what we believe to be psychological flexibility, our ability to bounce back after stress or adversity, traumatic events, things like that. And so I listed them here, but there's a couple of genes that we believe influence that our brain's ability to rewire neural circuits and have a more adaptive stress response. And so what we do know is that some of it is genes, or some of us are maybe genetically predisposed to be more resilient than maybe another. And so we might look in the comments or look at our friends or look at our own children, right? And say, why is this one more resilient than that one? Part of it is genetic, right? And then part of it is what we call epigenetics, right? Gene expression changes from the environment and lifestyle factors, right? These can definitely further shape the pathways, and it's not one size fits all. And so, what I'm trying to say here is resilience can be genetic. We can be a little bit predisposed one way or the other, and yet we can really shape these pathways, these neural circuitry to be more resilient. And we absolutely can do that. One of the things that we talk about specifically, and if anybody has any questions, don't hesitate to ask. One of the things where we notice this the most is when we talk about trauma or actually trauma, right? We talk about tragedy, but specifically what I call big T trauma. And the idea is when trauma happens, it actually structurally changes the brain. And so, with all that being said, I'll preface this with it can be changed back, which is actually wonderful. Um, and a lot of people may not know that, right? Something traumatic happens, and I was saying kind of a big T. I say that in kind of therapy or psychiatry lingo. And really, right, it's when something traumatic happens, it has the ability to change your brain. And part of this resilience conversation comes in that because we notice that you guys will see in the slides, there were some studies that Harvard Medical School did. And essentially what they're finding is there was a strong amygdala changes. And it basically, amygdala is the region linked to fear and learning. And so we talk about the amygdala when we talk about trauma. And basically, this has the ability to affect our resilience, right? Because amygdala associated with fear, associated with trauma. And so, when they looked at some of the studies, particularly this social defeat model with mice, the animals were exposed to severe stress. Some of those mice showed depressive-like behavior. And yet some mice showed natural resilient behaviors. And so this is all kind of those findings and that scientific part that I was talking about earlier that actually supports this idea that there is a scientific backing when we talk about resilience and how we can bounce back, right? It's not just like oh, well, that's a little bit positivist and I don't, that's not helpful. It's like, no, this is real science, right? We can show that some people are going to be a little bit more resilient than others, but it can also be changed if trauma affects our brain or if the neural circuitry is not wired for a more adaptive stress response, we can rewire it, right? Whether it was trauma, whether it's genetics, we can change some of that. And so, one of the main reasons why I put this into the slide is that if some people are thinking, oh, well, my kids or this one I can remember, or me, like I'm just genetically predisposed. I'm not as resilient. And it's like, okay. Like if you have identified that and you think that we could change it, right? We can help rewire neural circuitry because it absolutely can be rewired. What I try to explain it to people in kind of a more palatable way is I think about like wolves traveling through snow. I know it's going to sound crazy, but if you've ever watched any of those shows on like Planet Earth where you're seeing an above shot of like wolves hunting, right? They take the path of least resistance. They all go in the same line because they can't go out of and step out into that really deep snow because there's more resistance, right? And so the neural circuitry is the same way. Our brains do the same thing. They're going to go through those same snowy, like the snow cleared pathways until we start training our brain to open up a new one, right? And so the brain circuitry does, I'll say it this way. your brain does what it always does. If you start changing it, we can rewire, we can retrain neural circuitry. So that's kind of my way of imagining it. When I want to do the one thing like that I know is not the best thing for me, I'm always like, nope, I got to do the new thing. I got to go in the new path. I got to be the wolf that steps out and gets a new path to the food, right? Because that's what's going to make a difference. That's what's going to help me change. That's what's going to rewire my brain. If I do the same thing over and over again, right, I'm not becoming more resilient. And so if that helps you, it helps me. Um, Maybe I just think in snowy metaphor and analogies now because I spent too long in Alaska. But at any rate, let's kind of keep moving on the biology, the components of a resilient brain. I already talked about this a little bit, but what we also want to talk about when we talk about kids and resilience, the key player here is the prefrontal cortex. So I always call it like the secretary of the brain. It's the part of the brain, it's the front part you'll see in the image. It's responsible for higher order thinking, decision making, and regulating emotions. What we have to remember, particularly with kids, and we used to say, every class I've given before, I've always said 25. Your brain, your child's brain is not fully developed until they're 25. And a lot of this is the prefrontal cortex. However, there's been some recent studies done where they're saying that it's 40. Our brains are not fully developed until we're nearly 40, which for me as a therapist, I mean, it's mind-blowing. And now it makes so much sense, right? But the reality is our brain is not, it takes a long time for our brains, human brains, to develop all the way. And the reason I say this is because it's incredibly important as parents to remind ourselves higher order thinking, decision making, regulating emotions, right? All of those things, our kids are not fully there, right? And I talk to a lot of parents of teenagers, and some of you guys might have teenagers. This is really for all ages. Yeah, Shelly, I was surprised. 40 years old. I can next time we're here, I'll share the link of the study that they did. Because it kind of blows my mind too. And I'm like, no, I thought we were good. I thought 25 was like okay. Um, and I think there's obviously some like individual differences, but the reality is our children's brains are not fully developed. And if the prefrontal cortex is the thing that governs fear and threats, right? That's what keeps the prefrontal cortex is what keeps that in check. So if we have kids who are supposed to be responding to fear, right, to being scared of things, to threats, and they don't have that prefrontal cortex that's moderating that, that's buffering that, right? They're going to have some of those things. They're going to be less resilient. They're going to be more externalizing, all those things in the comments that parents shared, right? They're going to get more irritable. They're going to kind of throw up that like fight or flight response. So a lot of you guys mentioned your kids shut down. And I have worked with so many teens over the years and I see teens do it most, probably, maybe middle school age teenagers, like to teenagers, they shut down. And the reality is, when you see a kid shutting down, to me, this is what it tells me. Their prefrontal cortex is not moderating that stuff in their amygdala. And so they're going into fight or flight, right? Whatever the stress is, whatever the thing is, whether it's trauma, whether it's like being overstimulated, whether it's the dysregulation of whatever's happening in their life, right? That's the way that I view it. Now, remember, you're talking to a therapist, you're talking to a child and adolescent therapist. And so this is how I view that behavior. What we know is that resilient individuals tend to show stronger connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, and that helps them manage it more effectively. So we talk a little bit about like the circuitry, we talk about like what the structures are in the brain, and we talk about this idea that the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala are um, and so that's the idea is We help them with this, what we call like top-down control, right? This thing over is the prefrontal cortex. It's covering up that the limbic system, the emotional center of the brain. And these things are both biologically indicated and like environmentally indicated, meaning there's not a whole lot, there's nothing we can do to change the biological structure, right? And the fact that the prefrontal cortex and the brain is not fully developed going into our 30s and 40, right? But we can do things that help support them, co-regulate them, right? Help grow that circuitry, help create these responses, right? And what we do to model that. And so all of that stuff is what becomes most important. Okay, so we're like almost halfway, and for the most part, the rest of the presentation will be all the ways to support, all the like the actual meat and potatoes take home, what you can do. So what I'll do though is I'm going to stop here. I find that this might be more useful is to like any questions from the first half of the presentation. I can answer anything that we talked about that's confusing or any like personal questions that you have about, hey, well, I noticed this is happening, or what do I do when this happens? How can I support, my child through this brain development? Any questions that you guys have? I also really wanted to find that study so I can show Chelly because I was surprised too. Anybody have any questions? Okay. No question? Oh, I got one. How do we help our kids be less self-critical? That's a great question, Sherry. I think the first place I would start, so it's going to depend, like, how old is your kid? Why do we think that they're self-critical? Um, like, where does that come from? When you ask your child about it, like, hey, perfectionism, okay. So perfectionism and like being less critical of themselves or others, I think to me that almost reads as like there's anxiety associated with perfectionism, right? Like what if I fail this or what if I don't do perfectly? Um and there's a couple of ways. I think initially we have to figure out like where is that coming from? Why are they self-critical? And when you ask, it might be a good idea to ask, right? Hey, like I've noticed this thing. Like what do you think? Like where do you think that comes from? If they're able to like verbalize why or where they think it comes from, that's going to be super helpful in the ways that you help. Because that's where I would always start is like ask them, right? Like, hey, I'm just noticing this. Like, do you feel like you're a bit critical of yourself? Like, I notice that you put yourself down or you are not confident in these ways, XYZ. Where do you think that comes from? Right? Like, just kind of like having that conversation with them. But the brief answer would be I think a lot of perfectionism stems from anxiety, right? It could also be like, um, is there a lot of comparison? Do they have siblings? What kind of cultural or parental kind of setting have they been in? Does the kid have anxiety? Or have they learned how to handle their emotions when they fail? There's kind of a lot of questions. That's where I would go with that, Sherry. I hope that helps. How can I encourage my almost 8-year-old to use her words in a time of struggle or stress? Chelly, great question. 8-year-old is, man, this is hard. And 8 is a really young age. So, because what you're asking her to do is verbalize her, be able to to not only verbalize but identify and verbalize her emotions, two of which things are incredibly challenging even for adults that I know. I see adults even and they have problems doing it. Most kids that I see definitely under 13 struggle with this. So the good news is that your child is not alone. It's fairly normative. What the way that you can do that is one, most importantly, model that to, is it her? Yeah. Model that to her. So you start doing it. And that might just look like you're in the kitchen and like you drop something and you're like, oh, I'm so frustrated. Oh, like that thing fell again, right? Because we're teaching her. You're giving her the language and showing her how to do it. You're going to model that. So that's where I would start. I'm just giving you like a silly example, whatever that looks like, right? You're going to first identify the emotion, and that's going to be a big job, right? Because you're going to kind of get her like, it kind of seems like you're irritated with me, or it seems like you're a little upset today, or like, it seems like maybe you didn't get enough sleep, or right, you're gonna kind of like you can do some questioning there too, like, it seems like you're tired, or man, I hear you. You must be really mad. You seem really mad right now, right? Because we're suggesting, what is that? I'm gonna give her the language to say what she's feeling. So I think, and then we're gonna like validate that, right? Like, oh, I can understand like why you would feel mad or sad or lonely or whatever. Like, oh, that makes so much sense, right? So you're going to validate it because then we're getting her comfortable. She's starting to identify it. We're getting her comfortable. And then we're going to really teach her, hey, either when she doesn't say it or that's a teaching moment. If she's upset and she doesn't say it and it turns into a fight, later we come back and we say, oh, honey, I was realizing like you were really mad and you didn't tell me, and then we got into a fight, and like that makes me really upset. Do you think that you could tell me, "Hey, mom, I'm feeling really mad. I need some time." Or, "Hey, mom, I'm feeling really overwhelmed." Right? Like, because we're teaching her then communicate that with me, right? And ultimately, trying this with you hopefully is most comfortable for her, right? She feels safe with you and she can do these things. But that's kind of the pattern is you start by teaching her to identify her emotion. And that might also look like give her a list, right? You can print out like a list of all the emotions. They have a really cool one called the emotions wheel, and it kind of lumps them into mad, and it'll have like all the 20 mad emotions, happy, sad, right? Like, and it's really actually quite cool if you can find it just by googling it, and you could even print it out and give it to her, right? Because we're going to help her identify. This is on my PowerPoint, which is actually wonderful. The third point, which is helping our kids identify their feelings, right? um Now, what I will say, Chelly, she's 8, and so she's so, so young, and that's a skill that, like I said, most adults don't have. And so we just want to like be patient, and you're cultivating that and modeling it, right? Helping her do it. You can give her the language with the feelings wheel. And then you really want to use that validation to like when she verbalizes it and encourage her to verbalize it just simply by saying, "Hey, I really want you to tell me when you're upset," or "I'd really rather you told me that you were sad," right? Um, Now, if she's not going to tell you, you're going to spot it and you're going to verbalize it and then you're going to validate it. Okay. So that's the part where I guess we kind of hit most of the 3 points on this page, right? Oh, you're so welcome, Jelly. Which is, I can kind of backtrack just a little bit. The reality is we have to have a good relationship, right? The foundation to all of this is what does my relationship look like with my kids, grandkids, whatever, foster kid, whoever's in the house? What kind of relationship do I have with them? Do they feel safe talking to me? Um, I used to run a group for Twin Oaks High School, and it was really cool. They had parents and teenagers. It was mostly obviously teenagers. And we would put parents with like we would put them in groups with parents not with their own kids, right? We would put them with other kids. And the cool thing about that is we could really like emotionally detach from like the problems that maybe those teens were having with their parents, and maybe the parents could kind of see, oh, well, like this is, the kids could kind of emotionally detach from the parents. It was really cool. But the idea of all of that, the idea behind that is what type of relationship do you have with your kids? And positive discipline is a relationship first approach. And I say that with the intent that we have to have that as the foundation, or our kids won't talk to us. They won't talk to us. They don't want to be around us, right? Because we haven't cultivated that relationship. Now, if you find yourself in this position where you're like, oh my gosh, like I have a terrible relationship with them, they don't listen to me, they don't talk to me, they ignore me, they're mean to me, they don't respect me, like whatever. We have to start cultivating that first. And if I were to give you any advice from today, that would be what I would encourage you to take home. And that really looks like apologizing, repair, right? Like repair in the sense of conversations, apologies, like where did we go wrong? I sense that our relationship is not safe. How can I like earn your trust? How can we feel safe together, right? Like that's where I would go. And for some people, that's not palatable. I hope it's palatable for all of you to be like, no, I need to come at this place from like a compassion, empathy, warmth, loving, right? Because I feel like that's where we have to start. And if the relationship is damaged, I do believe it can be fixed. It takes time. You might need some help. But the reality is, to me and my approach, the relationship comes first. And so we'll get into it when I do the positive discipline class, which we really get into some of the techniques where I'll tell you this one, it's connection before correction. And so when we look at psychologically what we're going to do with our kids, it's before I tell them what they did wrong, I'm going to connect with them first. I'm going to level with them. I'm going to show them that I'm here. I'm compassionate. I love them. I'm warm. Now, they did something wrong, or they did something bad, or they did something displeasing, or they whatever. They did something happened. And it doesn't mean that we take that away and there's no boundaries or limits. It just means that we approach it from this relationship centric position, which is, look, I love you, right? I love you so much, and I can't let us talk to each other this way. Or, I recognize, I'm doing this class, and, I just realized like our relationship needs work. Connection before correction is the kind of tip or strategy in positive discipline. So before we would correct a behavior, we connect, right? Hey, I love you, and we can't talk to each other like that, right? You're connecting with them before we're correcting them, if that makes sense. That's just kind of one example. But the reason I brought that up quickly here is to just get to this idea that like start with your relationship. If your relationship has holes or your relationship feels damaged, let's start there. Let's repair it, because I don't think that anything else will work, right? It's like the pyramid with the shattered foundation. It's all going to tumble. So part of the way that we repair the relationship is some of these tips. So like we do active listening, right? Where instead of we're just kind of like distracted, and I always tell people like if your kids start talking, put your phone down, right? Like I was really good at that with my first daughter, and with my second daughter I'm not as good at putting my phone down, and I'm really really trying because there's all this research coming out now where our kids notice when we're distracted, and our phones are incredible distractions. And the reality is when we pay full attention, right? We're giving them all of that active listening. Oh, like I'm totally listening to you. I'm going to reframe what you said and say it back to you, right? Where I'm giving you eye contact. My body is turned towards you. I don't have my phone or my computer or my tablet or whatever. I'm paying full attention, right? They feel that, they absorb that, that builds the relationship as well. There's more to that we can discuss in the like technology, social media class, but in reality, active listening, right? Really acknowledging what they say, giving them a summary of what they said, right? Like all those things that go along with active listening. I'm sure a lot of you guys are well aware of what that is. Checking in, right? Hey, I know that it looks like you had a hard day, or I know that there's a lot going on. Like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Do you want to talk? Like, I'm here, right? Now, this is going to work better with some kids and some ages, but you kind of can feel that out. But checking in is another form of that relationship. I'm here, I care. I'm not just like distracted and avoiding, right? I'm going all in, right? So that's checking in and supervision kind of go hand in hand. For me, I tend to err on more supervision, and I know that both professionally and personally. So supervision in reality means more hard for us, right, as parents. And so I think the reality is when we're present, when we're there, when we're hovering, when we're supervising, they feel that presence, right? They feel that connection that improves the relationship. We know that those things enhance the neural connections because they're watching you, right? They're watching you do it. And so if you're right, I was telling, I'm not sure what her name, if it was Sherry, one of the parents, I was saying, like, let your kid see you get frustrated and then you regulate yourself through it. Let them watch that, right? Because that's how they learn it. Um, and so that goes along with this, with the active listening, the checking in, the supervision. If you're around and you're supervising more, they're going to see you more, right? They're going to connect with you more. They're going to watch that. And the mirror neurons, they're going to copy it. Um, yeah, Lila, absolutely. So the reality is like, if you're too angry or you're too impatient, like it's a sign to give yourself a breather. Absolutely. If you can do that and you can give yourself space and you can go take a breather, you can go take 5 or 10 minutes, depending on the safety and the age, do it, right? Um, because then it gives you, you get a little bit of that patience back. You can kind of talk yourself through it. Okay, I know I was overwhelmed. My lid's getting flipped. I'm too, I'm too reactive. And you could even say, right, to your child, I am getting overwhelmed by this conversation. I'm so mad. I'm frustrated. I can't talk to you calmly. I need to walk away. I'm going to go take 5 minutes and I'll be right back, right? Because they're, again, it's an example. They're watching you take space and then come back calmly and be able to do that. So if you feel it, do it. Absolutely great way to put it, Lila. My son gets angry when my wife is not paying attention. Yeah, absolutely. Kids, unfortunately, I'm getting more passionate about technology and specifically phones and how just how impactful it is on our lives. And I don't think that we fully realize it yet because they're new, right? The phone, the computer, advanced computer in our pocket, it's relatively new and we don't recognize what it's doing. I mean, we do. I think a lot of us do. A lot of us know and we recognize it and it's just hard to stop. But absolutely, right? Like our kids see that instead of looking at them, we're looking at our phones or we're looking at something because we're distracted. And to them, that translates to something else, which is why am I not good enough for them to pay attention to? Why is she not looking? Why does she not care? Right? It could be any of those things. They start to ask questions of themselves. Why is she not? And so that's where that anger comes from, right? Why can she not pay attention to me? Why am I not good enough for her to listen or look at me like that? And it's really it's quite heartbreaking that this is happening with phones. And my hope is that we're in a new season of researching it and recognizing it and getting everybody um, off our phones a little bit more. So we'll see how that goes, but I totally understand. If you guys have ever seen, there's some of the research where they did what was it called? Now I'm blanking on the name of the study. Um, I'll describe it to you. It was essentially, they did some psychological studies on babies with mothers who were emotionally not responsive. It's really awful and sad to watch because they used to do studies like this with real babies. And what they would do is they would sit the baby, um, you know, facing the mom, and the baby would be doing things, and they would tell the mom, don't respond. Don't look, don't emotionally respond to your baby when they're smiling or laughing, right? Mom would go like blank face. Um, and they did this for some time with these particular kids, and the effects were just awful, right? Because when there's not a response from the caregiver, when there's not presence and emotional response to the child, it has detrimental effects on their mental health. Um, and so the idea is, right, there's some of that happening with the cell phones, right? We're having that like emotional detachment with our kids because we're distracted, right? And so yeah, the reality is now we're kind of a little bit on a tangent, but the reality is supervision, checking in, active listening, making sure that we're paying attention, right, to our kids. That's going to build the relationship. Um, so kind of keeping moving, some of the other ways are going to, we talked about this, modeling appropriate control and regulation of intense emotions. So a lot of us have a hard time exposing our kids to this. And I'm not really sure why that is. I think that a lot of us, we didn't see it ourselves. Emotions are scary. So there's this idea that like, I need to go be by myself to deal with my emotions. I can't let my kids see this. And the reality is that's how they learn. Like, let your kids see you work through that emotion. Now, obviously, we want to get good at this before they're watching us, right? And if they see us and we make a mistake in how we responded and we didn't respond or regulate the way we wanted to, we can repair and apologize and say, "Hey, later when we're calmed down, I made a mistake. I yelled, I did the thing I shouldn't have done. I'm really sorry. I'm going to try to do better next time. I should have done this," right? Because we're not perfect, but like letting them see you moderate your emotions is the best teacher. It's the best. There, nothing else compares to modeling, particularly with children. And the data supports that because of what we call mirror neurons. I mentioned that a little earlier. And you guys can kind of go into a deep dive with that if you want. Essentially, what that means is kids' neurons, when they're babies, they're made to mirror their parents. And that's how language develops, how walking develops, right? They're watching you do it. And so those mirror neurons are picking up on it. And that's why modeling is so important. That's kind of the short, sweet version. Other ways can be to teach and or practice with them mindfulness and relaxation exercises. I don't know about you guys, but I've been pretty invested in Headspace for quite some time. I had a free membership way back in the day. I think during COVID, they were offering free memberships to like first responders. But if you have the ability to get Headspace, I don't know, I think it's like $4.99 a month. I could be wrong, or maybe it's like 12 to $15 a year. I could be wrong, but I consider that an investment and I pay for that because it's mindfulness and relaxation that you can do every day. You can do it from your phone. It's wonderful, and if you can use it, great. If not, there's tons of stuff on YouTube for free. Um, but learning those things, right? Mindfulness, relaxation is going to promote that neural circuitry that we've talked about. I think there's a question.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
me, Nitya. Yeah.
Nithya,
Yeah, I have a question about how does the moderation works with the teenage kids? Like they used to see certain way, right? Suddenly we change, and how do they take it?
tell me, how do they, how do they,
Means
with what?
like you said one example, right? We dropped something and we said, "Oops, I dropped this thing." The kids watching and they follow the same thing, right?
Yes.
In after some, I mean, sometime later, you stop saying that, but the kids already learned, right?
Hmm.
How did they take it? I mean, the changes, like
Well, so here's the thing. They're still gonna learn like so initially, like I think they're babies, right? We're going like, oops, like teaching them the words and like, right? And then they grow up, they get older. I will say
Mhm.
it hasn't solidified yet because their brain is still so plastic that we can still do it, but it looks different, right? So it's not like that exaggerated with a baby. Oh, oops, like, right? But we're gonna say like, I don't know, maybe it's something happens with your partner or with the house or with the job or and you're frustrated, you're mad, you're upset. You would just say like, I don't know, or you stub your toe, or I can't think of too many great examples right now, but something happens. Oh, like I am so mad. I can't even think straight, right? Like I am so upset. Like I need to go take a deep breath. I need to go outside. I need to go walk for I don't know, whatever it looks like. And you might say it a lot more intensely than I'm saying it right now. It might be like, like I'm so mad, right? Like whatever it is, that's going to look different, but you're still going to do it because even though they're 13, 15, remember their brain is still developing. Those neural connections can always be changed.
Mhm.
You're just going to do that. However it looks and feels most natural for you.
Mhm.
Or like I don't know, maybe you don't get angry or sad angry often. Maybe it's more sadness, right? Or it might be like a, you know, this whole thing like with school and like you haven't, the homework stuff, like I am so sad. I'm heartbroken because of what's happening with you at school. And like maybe you're crying and maybe it's like, oh, I need to go like, take a hot shower or take a walk or like I need to go read my book or whatever it is, like you're providing the example. I'm going to identify what emotion I'm feeling.
Mhm.
And then I'm gonna like okay, yeah, it's understandable that I'm upset or sad, right? And you can kind of talk yourself through this or
Mhm.
talk to them about it. And then, right, okay, I'm gonna do this, right? Or oh, I'm gonna cry, or oh, I'm gonna go outside and yell, or whatever it is, right? Like, but you're still modeling that. It doesn't matter how young or old they are.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the question? Does that
Yeah,
answer?
yeah, yeah. That is the question. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Mhm.
Yep, they're still gonna pick that up and it's gonna surprise you one day. Your kids will surprise you uh because then one day maybe somebody else will be dealing with something and they'll say what you said. Um and then you'll go, huh, like they were listening. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. But it happens and I've had parents tell me that, right? Like, oh my gosh, like I can't even believe she was listening. She heard me say that and right, it's kind of bizarre, but you just keep showing them what you're doing, how you're moderating your emotions, and as long as you're doing that in a healthy way, it that's what we need. That's what we need to show them. Um, okay. We have one more question. How do you manage a 5-year-old in a rage via tantrum going wild? The child's demands unreasonable. Giving in to him can be a bad lesson. Oh no, I love parent questions. This is how we learn. Um, so how do we deal with that? Here's the thing. When you have a 5-year-old, first of all, they have almost no emotional regulation, right? So what I would do is we're gonna wait for that like tantrum because that's what a tantrum is, right? There's a demand or there's an outcome that they want. And maybe it's give me the purple cup, but like we don't have a purple cup or whatever. I don't know. We don't give in to those things because if we're not willing to give into it every time, we're not going to give into it that one time. So you're absolutely right. If the child's demand is unreasonable and we're not giving into it, don't give into it. Because yeah, it absolutely sets us back. What we have to do essentially, especially with littler kids, younger kids, is we have to let the tantrum come to completion. I know it's not a desirable answer, but we're going to let it go full circle because it will, especially talking, reasoning, and oh, but do you want this instead? Or I'll get it's like we could get down on their level, close to them, right? We're going to regulate our own breathing and our own heart rate because our child's having a hard time and their emotional, the prefrontal cortex, their lid is flipped. So they're in like, you know, ancient reptile brain. They're not in like, let's talk and reason. And nope, it's like, I'm just going to be here with them until they're calm. Sometimes with kids that age, you can like distract, and like redirect. But I would argue that at that point, you're going to let it go through the loop because tantrums have like, they have a peak. They're okay. I notice this is happening. Now he's raging. It's the peak. We're going to ride it out, right? And we're not going to like ignore them and like put them away and not but we're going to be with them. We're going to use our breathing rate and our heart rate to calm their nervous system. That could take a while. um Sometimes if you have a kid who has like meltdowns or if they have any other like uh medical or psychological or psychiatry diagnoses, sometimes it could go into like meltdown territory, which I would argue is different because if there's no outcome, then it's not a tantrum, it's a meltdown. If it's just like right, like there was no reason, there's no like I want that or you did this or you buttered the toast the wrong way, right? That's an outcome, even though it's unreasonable and it doesn't make any sense. A meltdown would be like it comes out of nowhere. There's nothing that they want. There's nothing that the tantrum is happening for, if that makes sense. That would be a meltdown, and that's a little bit different because those can be more intense and longer. And but the reality is we don't give in, we're consistent, we try to calm them with ourselves. If they're like if they're putting themselves in danger, we can get them to a safe place physically and say, I'm going to pick you up and I'm going to take you into your room. You can shut the door and sit against the door if you need to. We do this with my 2-year-old because she has some of these right now. And we just wait. We wait. I do this thing where I really try to take big, deep breaths because I need to calm myself down too. So I take really big, deep breaths in my nose and out through my mouth. And I just wait. I wait. She sometimes is just they're screaming and they're mad, but eventually it ends. And so when we see that it's ended, we still are not giving into things. We're just going to kind of like, okay, like, what do we want to go outside? Do we want to go for a walk or do we want to go play with balls? I don't know, right? We could give them kind of choice with two choices. Um, but I think that's the best way to handle that because tantrums just happen, especially when they're really young like that. Um, and like I said, sometimes like for a 5-year-old, there might be like is there inconsistency? Do sometimes we give in and sometimes we don't? Because that might be like there's a goal there, right? And he might be thinking, oh, if I'm just loud enough and I'm raging enough, they'll eventually give it to me because they want this to stop, right? But if you get to a point where you're consistent and you don't do that, that behavioral kind of um intention, that behavioral out, it will go away, right? Because he's going to eventually learn, oh, this doesn't change anything, right? I don't get what I want. And so I'll stop this. Okay. You guys are so welcome. I just love when you guys ask questions. Okay, because I can fire through this pretty quickly, and you guys have the slides. And I think, like I said, learning from your specific examples sometimes is the best. I learn from you guys too. Okay, so teaching and practicing mindfulness, relaxation exercises, the development of appropriate role models like social network, right? Who do they have in their lives that's positive influence? Do they have a social support network? Do they socialize? Those are really important ways to promote resiliency because they're not only exposed to other kids, they're exposed to the value systems that you guys are developing within your family. And there's, multiple avenues, right, where they can get the same information, essentially. So let's like strongly encourage social network and socializing, positive relationships with like coaches, people at the church, people at school, peers, family members, all that stuff. So one of the things that's really helpful is when we teach our kids problem solving, right? So we help them set realistic, appropriate goals, and then we help them meet them. When they fail, a lot of times we're going to help them face challenges, but not rescue them. we could support them through it, right? Oh gosh, this feels so bad that like this failed or this happened or that didn't work out. Like I can totally understand why you would be so upset or why you would be sad, right? This makes me sad too. Um, but we'd rather let them face a challenge than to rescue them, right? And I know a lot of parents, we have our own kind of like family of origin or our own childhood issue where it's like nobody ever rescued me, nobody ever helped, right? And like I want to be there for my kids. And so we tend to like overcorrect a little bit. Um, and so just kind of be aware, like think about your kids' life, like have they set some realistic, appropriate goals for their age? And do you help them meet them? This can be things like reading books, getting into a hobby, schoolwork, a sport, like really anything, learning something new, a language, right? Like something to do with art, right? Like any appropriate goal that's like that's developmentally appropriate, and you help them meet it. I think most of you probably do this on like a daily basis. And so um, know that those things that you're already doing is helping build resiliency. Um, okay. So this will be really a really helpful slide because we've talked about a little bit like most of this stuff, but this is going to be like specifics, even to give you some of the language. So like when I talked a lot about teaching kids to identify, verbalize, and validating their emotions, um, acknowledge their feelings, right? This is teaching you how to do it. Ugh, it sounds like you're really frustrated, or it looks like you had a really hard day. Do you want to talk about it? Instead of offering solutions, or dismissing things, like acknowledge the feeling. Just start with validation. Um, and that is obviously, what we've talked about in these last couple of slides. We're listening, we're teaching problem solving. We're going to do that by helping them break down the big problems. We can help them brainstorm, we can help them choose a path. We can help them foster like their own autonomy, right? Like you got this. Like I know you did this thing. Remember when you did that all by yourself? Like you can do this. I remember that you did it. If you have any like big issues, come find me, right? Like I'll help you. Um Modeling your own resilience. We already talked about that, right? Like how do you handle your own stress, your own mistakes? Calm breathing, growth mindset, right? Like you might say, things like, when we fail, it's my opportunity to get better, right? It means I tried, right? Like the way that you word things when you get upset or you fail, and that's kind of what I was talking about with Nithya. If I said your name right, I'm so sorry. Those are the kinds of things, right? Um, Give them choices. This goes a lot with younger kids too. I always tell parents like give two choices with the same outcome. Uh, for littler kids, right? Because you're going to say something like, do you want to wear the blue shoes or the red shoes? Because we're not giving them a choice to put on shoes or not, because they need to wear shoes, right? But like they feel, especially in those like the 0 to 3, 0 to 5 age range, kids, though they want control. They have no control. And what we're trying to do is give them control, right? Now, this also goes into older kids, but you're going to do it different, right? You're not going to say, do you want to wear your red shoes or your blue shoes? You're going to say, like, uh, do you want to learn how to drive on our street or do you want to learn how to drive in this parking lot? I don't know, right? You're going to give them two choices and let them decide, right? And this is building that sense of capability. One of the biggest things that I encourage parents to do is one, try to have the consequences that you do give be natural consequences, right? The natural consequences of, for example, a younger kid example might be like not wearing their jacket outside, right? Or like, you know, um, not wanting to wear their shoes out on the front porch or right. Like the natural consequence is that they're uncomfortable and they don't like it, right? Um, Natural consequences for like an older kid might be they don't do their homework or they don't study. Well, the natural consequence is that they're going to either do miserably on a test or fail a test or fail a homework grade, right? Or get a 0, and that's going to affect their grade. Natural consequences are shown to be statistically more impactful when it comes to learning. So kids will learn better if there's a natural consequence than if there's a self-imposed consequence or a parent-imposed consequence, if that makes sense. So that one's a little bit more difficult. We'll talk about that in more of the positive discipline classes too, to give you some more examples. But the reality is that natural consequences are really powerful. And instead of saving or rescuing, we let them feel those natural consequences because it will promote resilience and that neural connectivity by doing that. We encourage independence, right? Like, don't speak for them to teachers or other adults. Like, teach them to do that for themselves, either to speak to other adults, to advocate for themselves, right? And obviously, you can teach them in the way that you feel fit. You're a parent, you know how to do this, right? Like, hey, I noticed that you chose not to do your homework. Part of the natural consequence is that you have to go talk to your teacher about how is she going to let you make that up? Like, I'm not going to talk to her for you. You have to do it. And you can talk to her today, right? Or like after school today, and I'll wait for you, or whatever that looks like. Um, but there's this idea that like we're going to help them learn to do that themselves. Um, and that is just one small example. That could be done with a lot of things. A kid misses practice, or they have to go talk to the coach and apologize, or whatever. Things that are making them more independent. Manageable doses of stress. So like gradually exposing them to age appropriate challenges so that they build coping skills, right? We're going to obviously always encounter stress in our lives, and I'm not telling you guys to purposely do things to like make your kids stressed out. However, there's going to be things age appropriate, like for example, um, we don't have your favorite cereal today. We have this or this, right? This is an age appropriate challenge for them to, right? You get to choose this or this. We're helping them cope with, I don't get what I want, or screen time. You've used your entire hour of screen time. Okay. So we're not going to get any more until tomorrow, or whatever this looks like, right? Um, I know you're allowed to be frustrated and it's not going to change my mind. Okay. Let's find something else to do. Do you want to read or do you want to draw? Or you could do this or that, right? We could go for a drive or go for a walk or whatever way that looks for you. Um, I would say kind of avoid fixing problems that they can handle. Never do for your kid what your kid can do for themselves. Covering up mistakes they make, speaking on their behalf, shielding them from disappointment or from like personal failures. We want to allow them to be exposed so that they learn. Um, this is a really cool exercise I wanted to share. I usually this is where I got the quote, by the way. But this is a technique that we use in therapy to help people reframe thoughts. And it's teaching us, right, that like emotional regulation, uh, modeling all that behavior, some of those things you'll actually say out loud, right? Something happens in the kitchen or you break something or something, oh, that did not go the way that I planned. I'm so sad, or like I'm so mad, right? Like using some of these things instead of like what our brain tells ourselves first, which is like, I can't do anything right. Like, I'm the worst. Like, no one likes me. You know, I better not cry. Nothing goes my way. I'm stuck. Like, I'm trapped. Any of that stuff, I'm not enough. We can reframe those with some of these examples and say them out loud to our kids, right? Model that. What if I succeed? Oh, like I'm so scared to do this, but like, what if I succeed? I don't know. I'm gonna try anyway. This is really hard. There's some space at the bottom after you go through this exercise. You could do it. I would encourage you to do it by yourself. And if not by yourself, with your partner or your co-parent or even your child. If you have a child who you think developmentally can do this, and even younger kids, I would even say like, hey, what does your brain tell you sometimes when you're really mad? Like, maybe is there something that your brain tells you that, you know, maybe you wouldn't actually say to yourself when you're happy, or like, and kind of get them talking. Like maybe they'll say like, "Ah, I'm so stupid," or this is the worst, or right. And you can help them reframe that. Um, and getting them in this practice of flipping the thought, right, is a way that we experience that different view of the world, that different engagement with the world. So what I will say is Annie posted a survey in the chat. We're going to ask you guys to do that at the end. And there's a copy of the presentation as well in the chat. Okay. So one of our bullets was, how do we help our students sit with uncertainty or stress, right? This is more of the like actionable things that you can do. We've learned a lot about resilience, how to improve it. We're going to keep kind of focusing on that for you at the very end. But now, how do we actually like stay calm? How do we meet them where they're at? How do we help them to not be burned out or overwhelmed, right? A lot of times with kids, I tell parents, just being present, right? They don't, sometimes they're like, oh, well, my kid doesn't want to talk to me. They ignore me. Sometimes simply, if that's the case for you, sometimes just I call it being a piece of furniture in the room, just being there. If your kid is like that frequently, doesn't want to connect with you, just being there, right? Being a solid object is what I like to call it. You're just going to be around, and you don't have to say things. You don't have to like ask them a bunch of questions. You could just, I mean, maybe they're playing video games and you're just sitting there in the room with them, giving them attention, but like not waiting or expecting anything, right? We're not distracted. We're just with them. We're just a piece of furniture, right? And then if we do that enough, oftentimes that leads to, right, the improvement of the relationship, talking, sharing, right? That's the goal, is eventually we get there. But if you have that struggle and you feel like the relationship is damaged, just be present. Just try. So like I said, not being distracted, like eye contact, no phone or screens, your body language, your posture, your mood, right? Your tone of voice, you're going to want to be calm, cool, collected, and you're just there. You're not expecting anything. You're not frustrated, right? You're not bringing any of that stuff with you. You're just hanging out. Now, another technique is if you feel like you can be present, but your child is open to talking or, conversing about things, you could ask gentle questions, right? We're going to avoid telling our own story. We're going to obviously be staying calm, but we're going to ask, do you want advice to this, or do you just want me to listen? Like maybe there's a problem, right? And you're just going to ask that simple question. Do you want any advice or help, or do you want help, or do you just want me to listen? I'll just be here, right? Um, the idea is like we're putting them in control of that, right? What do you need from me? I've noticed that you seem like you're kind of down lately. Is there any way I can help? What could I do to make it better, or, you know, help you out? What could I do to make you feel less sad? Is there anything I could do? Um, I think the other key part of this is that when our kids are stressed, we have to monitor our own stress levels, right? We talked a lot about that. Like a lot of this is like stay calm. We have to help them co-regulate. It's really hard. It's really hard. I say like taking space, taking a break, tagging in the other parent, right? Or, you know, that's just what we have to do. And you could say it. You could, again, model that by saying, I'm feeling a lot because of what you're feeling, and it's overwhelming me. I have to go take a break. I'll be right back, right? Like, because again, it's encouraged for our kids to see us, how we handle it. And it's very transparent and real to help our kids acknowledge that we pick up on the emotions of the other animals around us, right? Um, and I tell people that a lot. Like, we are animals. We walk upright. We don't have tons of hair and fur on our bodies. But the reality is that we're animals and we pick up on the feelings of others. And so it's normal. You are not a bad person, not a bad parent to experience that. Do your best to stay calm. Do learn what your tells are. Okay, I'm starting to feel that thing where my skin's getting hot, or I'm starting to clench my fists, or my heart's racing. Like, what do I need to do? I need to take a break, right? And telling them, hey, I'm noticing I'm starting to get really frustrated. I'm gonna go take a quick 5-minute walk. I'm gonna go do laps around the backyard. I'm gonna go whatever it is, right? Get some nice ice water, make a nice meal for us. You're going to monitor yourself and you're going to take care of yourself because that's the most important thing when it comes to our kids. So, this last slide, I'm really kind of talking about ways to promote your own resilience as parents. And that kind of segues nicely from the last slide, which is like giving yourself grace as a parent to know that this is hard. I said it at the beginning as the kind of disclaimer, which is you are not perfect. None of us are. We are all doing the hardest job that we'll ever do. And I really strongly believe that. Um, I've had a lot of different jobs, and this is the hardest one. And no one prepares you. There's no training and there's no, so just recognize that and remember when you're in those deepest, most emotional places that this happens to all of us. And the best thing that you can do is just try to take care of yourself because that way we show up better for our kids. Um, Okay. So I would argue that like one of the biggest ways to promote your own resilience, right? Now, if you're 40 or under, right, our brains are still developing. But the reality is having a support network is really critical when we talk about our own resilience. And that's simply because some of this stuff, like I said, is, external, internal, right? Like biology and all of that. Like we've been talking about the brain and genetics and epigenetics, but some of it is external, right? We can be more resilient. We have a wider window of tolerance if we're right, if we're supported, if we're feeling better, right? The stress doesn't hit us so hard if we have help, right? And so one of the biggest things is make connections, build a social network, however you know to do that, whether it's work, family, church, or something else, right? Like sports, hobbies. Anything that you can do to make and build a social network is going to help you become more resilient to the stress in your life. Um, One of the things that I talk about a lot with parents too is avoiding the tendency to see crises as insurmountable challenges. This goes back to the way that we view and engage with the world. It's that psychological flexibility. And I would encourage you guys, like when you go do whatever it is you're going to do after this class, whether you're going to go have dinner or go to work or go be with your family, um, think about how say to yourself, how flexible am I, right? Like how flexible is my brain? Am I Do I really struggle when something bad happens? Do I really go into that deep, dark, negative place when something bad happens? Or am I able to kind of go, okay, this is bad. This feels bad. I don't like this. This is hurting. And yet I also know that I'm going to make it through this, right? I can take it day by day. It could even be something as small as that, right? How we talk to ourselves in those times where we cannot go through life as a resilient minded person thinking I'm never going to get over this, right? I'm never going to be able to feel this pain. I'm trapped, right? Like it will destroy us. It hurts us, right? So like this tendency to see these things as insurmountable, my encouragement is like think about it. Again, I know that not all of us have the same ability, like with resources, with time, all those things. But like if you have that struggle, like get help, talk to somebody, share it with someone that you feel safe with, because the hope is that they can help you through that, right? Also, the acceptance of change in life, right? A lot of us really struggle with that. I know I do, and I did. I told you guys a little bit about that. That one particular change in my life. But once I learned to like accept that I was there and that I had to be there for 3 years and that I chose it, it changed my mental health, right? Now it wasn't easy. I didn't come to that like a bing, and I'm a therapist, but it's just the way it is. Sometimes that acceptance is the key to it all because acceptance doesn't mean that we like it. Acceptance doesn't mean that we condone it. Acceptance doesn't mean any of those things. Acceptance means that we're not going to fight reality, right? As it is. And so there's this concept that you guys could Google if you're interested in that kind of train of thought, which is called radical acceptance. It's a principle in therapy that we use sometimes, and that can be really helpful. Um, some other tips are realistic goals, movement towards them, right? Set them for yourself, whatever it is that you want to do. This is something that we talk about when we in therapy. It's called behavioral activation, and it's one of the things that we do when we deal with depression and things like that. Because what we have to do is we have to change we have to change our brain, right? We are naturally inclined to not do the things that we know are good for us because it's hard, right? We're taking that like path of least resistance again. And the reality is, every time we set a goal and we move towards it, our brain changes, right? And so it goes back to this idea that when we set goals, even if they're small, even if we do small things, the movement towards them is changing the brain. It's changing the neural circuitry. And so this is really good to do for yourself. That's the cool thing is like, even though your brain's fully developed, right? You're 40 and above, your brain's developed, you can still change the neural pathways. Neural pruning happens our whole life. And that's why you probably hear like when people get older, it's like, oh, do Sudoku and do puzzles. And because our brain, it prunes the pathways that we don't use. And it broadens the ones that we do use. So try to think about that. You're changing your brain when you do that, even at this age. Um, Taking decisive actions to face challenges. So, like deciding what to do or that you want to do something and then doing those things, right? Writing it down, whether it's like an actionable plan of, okay, this challenge that I have, what am I going to do to fix this or get out of this or make myself feel better? Um, Doing it in this very like kind of, okay, I'm going to brainstorm it. I'm going to write all the possible things that I could do. And then I'm going to just take small steps to each one, right? Make it as simple as you can and start there. Opportunities for self-discovery. This is really interesting because it can be, some people are kind of very into this kind of insightful, self, like introspective type thing. The reality is, when you either want to learn about yourself, discover who you are, discover what you believe, discover why you believe it, go more in depth in why do I parent the way that I do? What was my childhood like, right? We're going to self-discover. And this also creates resilience, right? We're changing the way that we engage with the world because we're getting more knowledgeable about who we are and where we come from. The opportunities for that, I mean, that's pretty like broad, open-ended. This could be just like conversations with people. It could be journaling. It could be, doing research. It could be talking to someone, right? All of those things are like opportunities to discover who you are. Um, Nurturing a positive view of yourself and your abilities, right? Really maybe asking, you could do this as an experiment, like go ask the 5 people that you're closest to, what are the good qualities about me? What do you think about the kind of person that I am? And I'm going to write down all those positive things that they say, right? You're a really good listener. You have really beautiful eyes. You are so smart. You're the most caring person that I know, right? Like whatever it is, you're going to write them down and you're going to cultivate that and you're going to think about that, right? This is changing the way that you view and engage with the world and yourself. Um, Keeping things in perspective. I mean, this is easier said than done. I realize that. And yet, maybe like you do this whole like perspective taking as an exercise where you say, okay, one way to think about it is the way that I'm thinking about it, which is this. What would like say my mom, how would she think about this? Or my dad or my uncle or my grandma or my spouse or my best friend? Like how would they think about this thing? And maybe you ask them, right? But you're perspective taking and you're encouraging your brain to do something new, which is maybe I don't see it the way that it actually is. Maybe if I saw it this way, I might feel better. I might act better, right? Like things might be different. That's one way to really get yourself in a more resilient headspace. Um, this kind of goes hand in hand with like maintaining a hopeful outlook in life. And that's not to mean like toxic positivity, right? I don't want anyone to go down that route where it's just like, everything's fine. I'm fine. I can do this, right? It's like, no, you want to be hopeful because hope is so important to our mental health. Without hope, I think we become trapped. Um, and so just possibly looking at your future and saying, okay, well, this is the way it is now, but like, what could I get in the future? What could I do? What could I have? What can I look forward to in the future? Right? Like for me, when I was in Alaska, it was, what am I going to get to do when I'm done? What are all these things that I'm doing now and the stuff that I've been doing for the past 3 years? How is this going to help me in my future life, right? When I get to go back to California and live in the sunshine and open my own private practice, like that's what I'm going to focus on is like how hopeful I am for that cool thing that might happen or might not happen, but I'm going to hope for it, right? It's a paradigm shift again. Taking care of yourself. I put in there like, what is this? It's a hard one, but my encouragement is doing these things, right? We know like healthy diet, trying to minimize like what substances we use, trying to move more, sleeping well, water, all these things, right? Taking care of yourself is kind of the basic. And yet I also know and recognize it's really hard to do, not only now with all the things happening in our world and in our economy and in everything, just trying to do little things, small thing that you can control, um, will help you and that will help your kids. So, okay. We have some contact up on the screen. This is to contact Annie. And if you would, please, please, please look in the chat. And there's a feedback survey. We would love to hear what you guys think about the first presentation. She listed the next session, which is adolescent and child sleep. I'll give you guys all my tips and tricks, strategies, and knowledge on sleep that I can fit into 2 hours. If anyone has any questions, don't hesitate to throw those in the chat